Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institute has today decided to award the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine 2010 to Robert Edwards for the development of in vitro fertilization.
Everyone burst into tears and hugged each other and then went to tell Dad. And Dad does know he's won the Nobel Prize and he's absolutely delighted.
I leapt out of bed standing in my nightie. And the tears were streaming down my face. I just couldn't believe it.
To Eshrey, Bob Edwards receiving the 2010 Nobel Prize for Medicine is a recognition of his extraordinary achievements in reproduction research. Eshrey described it as an honour well-deserved and long overdue. And because Bob has been a great source of inspiration, always determined to share his vision, the award is especially gratifying to Eshrey, a society he steered from its foundation through to later years.
Since 1978, an increasing number of children, now approximately 4 million, have been born thanks to IVF. It's a safe and effective therapy. It's regulated by strict ethical guidelines, and long-term follow-up studies have determined that IVF children are as healthy as other children. Furthermore, many of the IVF children born during the 1980s now have children of their own, conceived without the help of IVF.
It seems really simple now, but if you have a blank piece of paper, which Bob had at that time, you've got to start somewhere. And it's biology, it's not engineering. So every egg is different, and the quality of egg can be influenced by a matter of hours exposure.
The first major breakthrough came in 1969, when Edwards achieved the fertilization of a human egg in the lab.
He said, "Come and look at this, Barbara." But it was a moment of magic, really, because this was when the egg was dividing.
But the breakthrough was followed by a decade of frustration. The fertilized eggs refused to develop, and Edwards realized he needed to use eggs matured in a woman's ovary rather than in a laboratory dish. He heard about the work of Dr. Patrick Steptoe, who was pioneering keyhole surgery in his gynecological work, and quickly teamed up with Steptoe.
Steptoe and Edwards, what a combination. And they worked so closely together, and they shared that same fundamental belief that the pain of infertility can be conquered.
For 8 years, the two men worked together to refine their techniques, dashing constantly between Cambridge and Steptoe's unit at Oldham Hospital. They struggled with scepticism and outright hostility.
I think they were both brilliant in their own way, and they realized that neither could work without the other one. So they realized they needed each other if they were going to achieve any sort of success with this potential for helping infertile couples.
But at last, in late 1977, Robert Edwards had news.
He called me one day, he said, I want to tell you we've got our first pregnancy, and I cried.
It wasn't really until I read it in the paper that this woman from Bristol was going to have the first so-called test tube baby. Obviously, I realised that they were talking about me.
Because we had no ultrasound in those days, we had no special tests to check that the baby was normal. They did not know until Louise Brown was born that the baby would be normal.
After decades of laboratory and clinical trials, the breakthrough came in 1978 with the birth of Louise Brown, hailed as the first test tube baby.
I am now handing the baby to Dr. Edwards, whose brain, skill and perseverance has made this work possible. He started this work some 20 years ago and has concentrated a great deal of time and energy into the project.
I remember somebody saying, Leslie, wake up, open your eyes, because you've got a little daughter, and I could just vaguely remember seeing a little tiny face.
Patrick Steptoe died in 1988. Over the years since 1978, more than 10,000 babies have been conceived via IVF here at the Bourne Hall unit, created by Robert Edwards and Patrick Steptoe.
Bourne Hall, to Bob, is the sanctuary. It's a symbol of determination to deliver what he knew would create millions of children worldwide, millions of families worldwide. It's a symbol of his and Patrick's stubbornness, determination to bring the therapy to as many people as they could.
Along with French gynecologist Jean Cohen, Robert Edwards laid the foundations for ESHRE in the early 1980s. The main incentive for founding ESHRE was the lack of opportunity for both scientists and clinicians to report progress in reproduction research. It was now almost 6 years since the birth of Lewis Brown, yet the Europeans, unlike the Americans, still had neither their own learned society nor access to a journal which would gladly publish their work. In 2011, ESHRE has become that society, and Human Reproduction, together with its sister journals Update and MHR, have become 3 leading journals. At the opening reception of ESHRE's first annual meeting in Bonn in 1985, Robert Edwards personally welcomed everyone at the entrance. Despite the pouring rain, the guests waited patiently, honoured to be greeted by the very man who had been the inspiration for their work. From 1985 onwards, ESHRE would stage a scientific meeting every year. These days, the convention hosts more than 8,000 participants. Additional ESHRE events are held every 2 weeks. This huge achievement is in no small measure due to the drive and energy of Robert Edwards. By 1986, remarkably, Bob was the chairman of ESHRE, an editor of Human Reproduction, a director of Bourne Hall Clinic near Cambridge, and a professor of human reproduction at the University of Cambridge. And in 1987, he almost single-handedly, and at short notice, organised the 3rd annual meeting of ESHRE in Cambridge. Bob provided ESHRE with its constitution and motivation, but he also positioned ESHRE as a point of reference in the ethical debates which inevitably flowed from the progress of reproductive medicine. In both his roles as chairman and former chairman of ESHRE, Bob Edwards was as supportive and inspiring as he would be in the editor's chair of Human Reproduction. And it's fair to say his charismatic genius, along with his scientific foresight, inspired the growth of ESHRE and its journal. For all these achievements, Bob was awarded the ESHRE honorary membership in 1993. ESHRE offers Bob its warmest congratulations, not only on behalf of the many professionals whose careers he helped shape and inspire, but also on behalf of the countless couples for whom IVF has finally brought fulfillment. Today, as the Nobel Assembly has said, Robert Edwards' vision has become a reality and brings joy to infertile people all over the world, a sentiment proudly shared by ESHRE.
Dear Robert Edwards, the result of your work has touched us all, giving millions of infertile couples a precious gift, a child. I ask Professor Edwards' wife and long-term scientific companion, Dr. Ruth Fowler Edwards, to come forward and receive his prize from the hands of His Majesty the King.
We all felt very emotional that week because for us it had set the record straight. You know, he had at last been identified as the father of IVF, which we always felt was his place. And you know, here it is going down in the history books now.